Let's dive straight into the list of experiments that cross the line. Number 10. The elephant and the hallucination. In 1962, at Lincoln Park Zoo, researchers had the idea to inject an elephant with enough LSD to send 1,000 people on a psychedelic trip. The goal was to investigate if LSD could induce must in elephants. Must is a state of hormonal rage that makes male elephants incredibly aggressive and territorial. The subject was Tusko, a 14-year-old bull elephant. The dosage was 297 milligrams of LSD, about 3,000 times the human recreational dose. The reasoning behind the dose: if the animal is large, it requires a bigger dose. Within 5 minutes, Tusko began to panic. He trumpeted, ran in circles, and suddenly collapsed. The scientists injected antipsychotic drugs to try and save him. When that failed, they attempted barbiturates, which only worsened the situation. 1 hour and 40 minutes after the initial injection, Tusko was dead. The scientists' conclusion in the paper was hilarious. Elephants appear to be highly sensitive to the effects of LSD. This disaster is cited as one of the most foolish moments in science history. Tusko's tragedy triggered strict protocols for drug testing on animals.
Number 9. The two-headed dogs. Vladimir Demikhov, a Soviet surgeon, shocked the world in the 1950s by creating dogs with 2 heads. He surgically transplanted the head and forelegs of a small puppy onto the neck of a larger adult dog. Both heads were functionally independent. They could smell, drink, and interact separately. The smaller head was often seen trying to lick milk dripping from the host dog's chin. The longest living dog survived for 29 days. The primary failure was immunological rejection, a challenge we still face in human transplants today. One of the heads, out of frustration, would bite the other's ear. Imagine being permanently joined to someone who won't stop biting your ear. These experiments were banned, but Demikhov's work paved new paths. He refined techniques crucial for modern organ transplant surgery. The first human heart transplant surgeon even visited his lab. Thus, every successful organ transplant has roots in the bizarre two-headed dog experiment.
Number 8. The trauma of little Albert. A 9-month-old baby named Albert was cheerful and enjoyed a fluffy white rat. But psychologists John Watson and Rosalie Rayner had a sinister mission in 1920: to prove that fear could be taught. Every time the baby reached out to touch the rat, a terrifying, loud clang of a hammer hitting a steel bar was made right behind his head. They repeated this relentlessly. Little Albert not only developed a phobia of the rat, but also of anything white and fuzzy. A fur coat made him cry, a rabbit led him to panic, and even Santa Claus's beard caused terror. After successfully turning a happy baby into a neurotic wreck, the scientists simply called it quits. They didn't even bother to reverse the psychological damage. Some historians track the boy, who died young at age 6 due to hydrocephalus. Others believe he lived, likely avoiding pet stores forever. This experiment is the reason we now have strict guidelines for human experimentation. Apparently, someone had to write a rule that says, "Do not traumatize children in the name of science."
Number 7. The tickling the dragon's tail incident. In 1945, a dangerous chunk of plutonium was nicknamed the Demon Core. Scientists at Los Alamos conducted experiments called tickling the dragon's tail. They used beryllium half-spheres and slowly brought them close to the plutonium core. The closer they got, the more neutrons were released, escalating the risk of an uncontrolled nuclear reaction. The safety tool for this high-stakes job? A common screwdriver. Physicist Louis Slotin held the spheres apart only by the tip of this tool. He was ironically known as the Chief Armorer of the United States. One day, the screwdriver slipped. A bright blue flash filled the room. The air around Slotin was visibly saturated with radiation. He quickly separated the spheres, but the dose received was lethal. He reported tasting the radiation, a metallic, acidic flavor. 9 days later, he was dead. This wasn't the first mistake. Months earlier, another physicist, Harry Dogliani, had a similar accident with the same core. He dropped a tungsten carbide brick on it, receiving a fatal dose. After the second death, they changed the protocol to robots and sophistication monitoring equipment. The cursed core was finally melted down and repurposed.
Number 6. Dr. White's head-swapping hobby. Neurosurgeon Dr. Robert White believed in the feasibility of head transplants in the 1970s. He began his experiments on monkeys. He connected one monkey's head to another monkey's body. The transplanted monkey could see, hear, and move its face, but was completely paralyzed from the neck down. Reconnecting the spinal cord is an insurmountable challenge, requiring the precise joining of millions of tiny nerve fibers. It's a task medicine still hasn't mastered. The monkey survived for 8 days. Those 8 days, however, redefined neurosurgery. White's techniques for keeping the brain alive during the procedure were crucial. Today, cerebral cooling techniques protect patients during complex heart surgeries. But Dr. White didn't stop at monkeys. He wanted to perform the transplant on humans. He hoped to give new bodies to people with terminal illnesses. He even had willing volunteers. The medical community banned his experiments, and the media nicknamed him Dr. Frankenstein. Despite the controversy, he was nominated for the Nobel Prize, not for head swapping, but for his revolutionary cerebral cooling techniques.
Number 5. The Pituitary Gland Catastrophe. In the 60s, doctors found a solution for children with growth problems, a hormone extracted from human brains. Scientists collected the pituitary gland from corpses in funeral homes and morgues. Each treatment required glands from up to 50 bodies. The treatment seemed miraculous. Children who barely grew suddenly shot up. Parents were relieved, and doctors celebrated. But the harvested brains contained a silent parasite, prions. Prions are infectious proteins that transform the brain into a spongy structure. They cause Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, CJD, creating holes in the brain tissue. The most terrifying part is incubation. You can be infected for decades without symptoms. Prions destroy silently, and when symptoms emerge, the patient is already condemned. Thousands of children received this treatment between 1963 and 1985. In the late 80s, patients began to experience bizarre symptoms: confusion, loss of balance, tremors, hallucinations, and total brain failure followed. It was like watching someone age 50 years in just a few months. The treatment was banned, but 200 people had already succumbed. Some recipients are still alive, unaware if the time bomb in their heads will be activated. Today, the hormone is lab-made, but those who received the original treatment live under the shadow of a silent parasite.
Number 4. Harlow's wire mothers. Imagine a baby monkey with 2 choices: a cold wire figure that provides milk, or a soft cloth doll that has no food. Psychologist Harry Harlow used this in the 50s to prove that love and comfort are more important than feeding. He separated the infants from their biological mothers at birth. They had 2 surrogate mothers, one made of wire with an attached feeding bottle, and one made of soft cloth, but without milk. The babies only sought the wire mother when hunger was unbearable. The rest of the time, they clung to the cloth mother for security. When frightened, they ran to the soft doll, even with an empty stomach. They made a quick refueling trip to the wire and ran back to the comfort. Then, Harlow built the Pit of Despair, a total isolation chamber. The infants spent months alone, without contact, only darkness and metal. The isolated monkeys were released and were deeply disturbed. They couldn't interact with other monkeys. Some swayed, others self-mutilated. Most were unable to become mothers or fathers. Despite the cruelty, the results were crucial. Before Harlow, doctors thought babies only needed food. Mothers were advised to avoid coddling their children with excessive affection. The work proved the vital need for affection and comfort. This changed childcare in hospitals and orphanages. The experiments were banned and are used as an example of scientific misconduct.
Number 3. Brain reprogramming at the Allen Memorial Institute. In the 1950s, patients were tied down and subjected to loudspeakers playing the same message on a loop while receiving injections of potent drugs. Dr. Donald Cameron, at a respected hospital in Montreal, attempted to reformat human minds like faulty hard drives. His patients were ordinary people seeking help for mild anxiety or postpartum depression. His method was savage. He induced chemical comas that lasted for weeks. Then he played simple phrases on infinite repetition. The same phrase was repeated up to 500,000 times. Messages like, "Your mother hates you," or "You are useless." One patient with anxiety heard the phrase, "You killed your mother," who was alive, 200,000 times. The CIA secretly funded the project under the codename MK Ultra. They wanted to create perfect spies and brainwashed enemy agents. The result was a disaster. Hundreds of people were left with permanent brain damage. Many lost the memory of their own children and the ability to read. Some even forgot how to perform basic tasks like using the bathroom. The experiment stopped in 1965. Survivors called the location the sleep room. Cameron's recorders remain in the hospital's basement to this day.
Number 2. The Milgram Experiment. Imagine yourself in a room with a machine full of switches labeled from severe shock to XXX. A man in a white coat orders you to flip these switches, electrocuting someone in the next room for every incorrect answer. You must increase the voltage. You hear desperate screams of pain. The victim pleads to stop, but the scientist only says, "The experiment requires that you continue." In 1961, Stanley Milgram wanted to know how far an ordinary person would go in following an immoral order. A shocking 65% of participants went all the way to the maximum voltage. This occurred even after hearing terrifying pleas and total silence. The silence suggested the person might be passed out or dead. The target was an actor, the screams pre-recorded. No one was actually electrocuted, but the participants didn't know. Many sweated, trembled, and had nervous breakdowns, but they continued to obey because an authority figure commanded it. One was so convinced he had killed someone that he offered his $4.50 payment back. Psychiatrists predicted that only 1% of participants would go all the way. They were wrong by a gigantic margin. Ordinary people are disturbingly more prone to following cruel orders than we'd like to admit.
Number 1. The Stanford Prison Experiment. In 1971, 24 university students were paid to simulate a prison for $15 a day. They were neither criminals nor trained guards. They were normal young men randomly assigned to the roles of prisoner and guard. The prison was just the basement of Stanford's psychology department. In just 36 hours, these normal young men began to become tyrants. The guards not only played the role, but forced the prisoners to clean toilets with their bare hands. They forced them to strip naked and sleep on cement floors. They began to apply psychological torture, sleep deprivation, and verbal abuse. One prisoner had such a severe emotional breakdown that he screamed uncontrollably on the second day. Young men who would likely help the elderly cross the street were forcing other students to do push-ups until they dropped. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. It was shut down after just 6 days. A young female psychologist was horrified by the scene. The principal researcher, Dr. Zimbardo, was so immersed that he didn't see the error. He was acting more like a prison warden than a scientist. It took his girlfriend threatening to break up with him for him to come to his senses. The experiment proved something terrifying. Give someone power, and they can transform into a monster. It was banned and led to massive revisions in human research ethics.